You know his name, Bond, James Bond, the iconic character created by Ian Fleming that inspired a cinematic franchise lasting over 60 years. I knew Bond, not through cable, streaming, or even the movie cinema. It was called the VCR. What technology? Today, I'll be rating the 8 Bond films from the Connery era, beginning with Dr. No through Diamonds Are Forever, and Never Say Never Again, because who wouldn't? And yes, I'm throwing in on Her Majesty's Secret Service, since it's a one-off and technically wedged within the Connery years. Besides, where else would I put it? I'll rank the films in order how I'd recommend them, influenced by their production values and overall enjoyment, like I did on the VHS, 3 movies on a single tape with no quick way to skip ahead. Fair warning, my commentaries have a tendency to cause anxiety, rage, and disbelief, but that's why you're here, I hope. Kindly consider leaving a like, share, or subscribe if you enjoy this content. Starting off at the bottom, number 8, Never Say Never Again. It's 1983, and the British 00 program has been long suspended. James Bond has been out of action, spending his later years teaching and training. But Spectre is always up to something. After managing to steal 2 live nuclear warheads, they plan to blackmail NATO. After a failed assassination attempt on Bond's life, the 00 section is reactivated, and 007 is back in action again. Never say never. Again. How can I put this kindly? Never Say Never Again is boring. It's the film that made Connery retire from the character for the 3rd and final time. There was a reason for this to be made. It goes back to a legal feud between Fleming and Thunderball screenwriter Kevin McClory. But I don't care. Who does? It's a remake of Thunderball that no one wanted or asked for. Considered an unofficial Bond film, since it's not an Eon production, it still had the legal rights to use the characters and story from Thunderball, but not to the theme song or the iconic gun barrel sequence. However, it does have Sean Connery. That makes it legit. I do have vague memories of 1983 showcasing 2 Bond movies at the theater. How it was the legendary Connery returning against Moore, who established the title as the official James Bond. Honestly, it disappeared from my memories until I saw the movie case in a video rental place. You thought I struck gold. Imagine discovering a long-lost Bond movie starring Sean Connery. What could go wrong? Plenty. It becomes real obvious to anyone who could just spell Bond that this was a homage, a rip-off copycat remake for the modern era of 1983, where Bond is taken out of his semi-retirement as a teacher. I can see where the film wanted to go with the villain, putting an old lion against a next-generation villain sociopath who is youthful and enjoying his own narcissism. How are we to know where this fits in the Bond timeline? Throwing out Thunderball, what Bond films are considered canon in this parallel universe? All of them? None of them? Never Say Never Again was a vanity project that had fever dreams to kick off a whole new Connery Bond universe. It didn't happen for a reason. But it sorta kinda does end on somewhat ambiguous terms for the Sean Connery timeline. Yeah, I know it's got Max von Sydow and Kim Basinger. The movie still sucks. Coming up with number 7, You Only Live Twice. American and Soviet spacecraft are hijacked, stolen as you will, while in orbit over Earth. Each side blames the other, threatening an all-out war between the 2 superpowers. Meanwhile, British secret intelligence suspects the Japanese and assign Bond to investigate. It's another plot schemed by Spectre, and it will take substituting Japanese agents and a lot of ninjas to help Bond save the world. From here, there's no bad Bond movies. However, something's got to take the spot. Here is You Only Live Twice, the film that had Sean Connery quit the first time. There's a lot to like. Exotic location of Japan, Donald Pleasance as Blofeld, and ninjas. I just don't enjoy this more than I hoped. A lot can be attributed to the writing. Written by Roald Dahl, yes, that Roald Dahl who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Dahl said the original novel was Fleming's worst book, with no plot in it, which would even make a movie. Thus, Dahl took some ideas from Dr. No, recent real-life spacewalks, and came up with a working draft in 6 weeks. You'll see some of Dahl's zaniness and hints of body horror in the film. The question is, did this belong in a Bond film? Bond's integration into a Japanese village may have looked good on paper. It would have been interesting if this was a miniseries and there was some payoff by looking and sounding Japanese. Do this in science fiction, it becomes a classic. Do this in contemporary films, you'll get an egg dropped on your head. As for Bond's death scene, instead of making it into something dramatic, it's a means to shoehorn the title in the film.
You only live twice, Mr. Bond.
You Only Live Twice is a fish out of water story, with Bond experiencing a new culture. And it does show promises of a nation emerging into developed status, but with unique characteristics. An homage to Asian cinema, but it ends up with Blofeld causing serious immigration problems for the Japanese officials. A British agent saves the space programs of 2 governments and stops World War III. I'd wonder what he'd do with a third life. Number 6. Diamonds Are Forever. Diamond smuggling and its possibly maybe threat of affecting its market price sends Bond, licensed to kill, to investigate on behalf of a vertical market that can't stand losing a slice of their profit margins. There is no honor among thieves, however, and the trail of lost rocks runs cold until Bond ends up in Las Vegas and uncovers Blofeld's plan to build a superweapon to blackmail the world.
And we hold the world ransom for $1 million.
I rather enjoyed Diamonds Are Forever. Truth be told, if I were to rank by number of repeat views, I'd put this near the top. It starts small like Goldfinger, with Bond investigating a rather mundane and banal assignment to protect the investment of those who cornered the market in precious metals and stones. In this case, diamonds. The stakes are revealed to be higher and end in pandemonium. However, it's not a film I would recommend very highly if you wanted to see the best of Bond. Being an American, Las Vegas isn't a very exotic, far-off location. It's a place where they take your money and you thank them for it.
Give me back my dollar. That's my last dollar.
It's 1971, and instead of Diana Rigg playing a character needing a husband, we get Jill St. John as a strong, independent woman. Okay, it was 1971 after all. My gripes are a boring Blofeld, whose return deflated an otherwise triumphant pre-credit scene.
Welcome to hell, Blofeld.
Considering the end of Her Majesty's Secret Service. An underwhelming reference to Howard Hughes, Let This Man Sell Sausage. And a boring ending that's too reminiscent of earlier Bond films. With Las Vegas as a backdrop, it's another variation of Bond out of his comfort zones as he battles the hustle and cons of Sin City. Though it's silly at times, Sean Connery is relaxed and seems to have fun. He got paid enough for it. Still, Blofeld is a real dud, and Connery would quit the role for the second time. Number 5. Dr. No. The murders of British nationals inside an MI6 station sends Bond to Jamaica. With the help of the CIA, he learns of a bigger conspiracy of American rocket launches being interfered with using radio jammers originating from a Caribbean island. Since it's privately owned, no one felt like knocking on the door. Bond meets with the enigmatic Dr. No, an agent of Spectre. I struggled deciding where to put Dr. No. It's certainly enjoyable, but would I recommend this more than the others? It's the first of the series, and as described elsewhere, feels more like a pilot episode, throwing concepts and tropes, waiting to see what works. It doesn't have the stupid moments other Bond entries have, but it's also not very expansive, as the many films that follow it. The movie is a test screening of James Bond. Since most of the film is through Bond's perspective, And we don't get to see a larger picture, a larger world with cutaways to the villain. What works, what doesn't work, all begin here. Speaking of villains, Dr. No is a delusional one with a backstory carrying quite a grudge. Like the many villains who follow, he is intimidating, has a physical or character quirk. Unfortunately, Dr. No was introduced late and doesn't yet have a sidekick. That is standard practice in many Bond films.
It's a Smith & Wesson. And you've had your 6.
Number 4. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Bond gets brutally kidnapped by a mob boss who offers him £1 million to marry his only daughter, Tracy. Did I mention Tracy is played by Diana Rigg? Anywho, Bond refuses an arranged marriage, but agrees to string Tracy along if he's told the whereabouts of Blofeld. What a jerk. Bond uses a genealogy scheme to get an audience with Blofeld isolated in the Swiss Alps, where he discovers a plot to spread biological agents destroying the world's agriculture unless the world gives in to Blofeld's demands. Amnesty, money, and promises to address him as Count Blofeld. Oh yeah, Bond gets married. This doesn't happen to the other guy. You knew this would be in the list somewhere. I could have easily ranked this at the very bottom and had plenty of history to justify it. This was George Lazenby's only role as Bond. It went so poorly he didn't want to come back and made Connery the highest paid actor at the time with his return in Diamonds Are Forever. Lazenby's take comes across as petulant, whiny, sort of a goofball, and then there's that breaking the fourth wall that many still won't forgive.
This never happened to the other fella.
But there is something about this Bond that only Lazenby could pull off. It's a more vulnerable Bond, fighting for his life and his future. Lots of credit goes into the cinematography. The fighting have their unique brutality. The car chases are exciting as well as the exhilarating scenes on skis. The real allure to Majesty's Secret Service is with Diana Rigg as Countessa Tracy. Fresh in the minds of fans of the Avengers series, she would rank number 1 of all Bond women in the early decades, if not all of them. Telly Savalas gives a very interesting interpretation of Blofeld, coupled with Lazenby's interesting take on Bond, but it still feels like a one-off movie that it is. On Her Majesty's Secret Service enjoys a renewed modern retrospective. I am just as guilty. I still don't care much for the plot and its execution, or how Bond connects the dots to Blofeld. But it's not about the story, but about Bond's journey. It's about a man who had enough of death and danger and just wants to be in love. I don't necessarily think this is a better film than Diamonds Are Forever, which the producers paid a small fortune to Connery. I do recommend it more. Majesty tried to do something with Lazenby the producers wouldn't dare with otherwise. Sometimes you can only do that with a wild card. Number 3. Thunderball. Spectre steals 2 atomic bombs from NATO using identity theft and lots of plastic surgery. The plan is extortion, else 2 western cities will glow radioactive hot. It's time to send Bond to the Bahamas in the race against the clock to find and recover the bombs. It's a battle above and below the water. Because Bond strikes like Thunderball. After the success of Goldfinger, the producers tripled their budget from $3 to $9 million and became a box office success, pulling in more than any of the previous 3 Bond films or the next 5. Personally, I long thought Thunderball as a middling, forgettable entry. However, recent watches have made me see why it was such a financial success. There is melodrama throughout, from seeing Bond perform an assassination to witnessing Spectre's ploy unfold, work out successfully, before ultimately betrayal. Of course, Bond moves in on Largo's mistress, Domino, using her brother's death to seduce her. Largo is more of an extrovert villain than Goldfinger, just without an eye. Thunderball will forever be known for its underwater sequences. It was new, it was different, especially for 1965, and we get a lot of it. so much it becomes almost annoying. I'd be lying if I told you I enjoy Thunderball more than Diamonds Are Forever, but this is a better film with a better ending. An out-of-control yacht was more exciting than that monstrosity we got on an oil rig. Thunderball was the high watermark for Bond films for years. It wouldn't be until Moonraker pulled in more than Thunderball. Adjusted for inflation, it would be the 2012 release of Skyfall to make more at the box office. It's not a film that entered the zeitgeist like Goldfinger, but it gave the audience a formula many endeared. If they only gave us more scuba diving. Number 2, From Russia with Love. MI6 has a rare chance to get their hands on a Soviet cryptography device, the Lecter, but only if they send Bond to help a Russian clerk defect. Little does Bond know it's a ploy by Spectre to lure him into a trap for revenge over Dr. No. Meanwhile, Bond has to figure out Tatiana's motives. From Russia with Love is a Cold War espionage film, with Spectre posing as double agents of the Soviet Union. It has two stories intertwined. One is Bond's mission to retrieve and steal the Lecter and escort Tatiana safely to the West. The other is Spectre's mission to assassinate Bond, steal the Lecter from him, and sell it back to the Soviets. Everyone wins. Through my younger years, I've overlooked this film, partially because of its age and more grounded storyline. It's not as bombastic as the films in the 1980s where I was first interested, but grounded was what I appreciated the most. Other than that over-the-top kilorama, the movie is a slow burn, a spy versus spy film. Every death raises the stakes until it all comes to a boil with Spectre's Grant versus Bond, the old man. Credit has to go to Daniela Bianchi for her performance as Tatiana, with Barbara Jeffords doing the voice dubbing.
I know I love you, James.
Yes, this Barbara Jeffords. From Russia with Love is one of those rare Bond films that ends feeling more than just a last celebratory fling with the Bond girl of the moment. Only a select few of Bond films, maybe just a couple, persuades us to root for Bond to settle down and get out of the killing business. While the world would be really grateful for the next Bond film, we have to wonder, whatever became of Tatiana? Finally, number 1, Goldfinger. The wealthy elite convinced the British MI6 to investigate a possible gold smuggling scheme by an industrial magnate who might manipulate the market 0.5%. What ends up happening is Bond gets too up and personal with the misanthrope Arlick Goldfinger, who is a little too tight with American mafia houses and foreign atomic power programs. Goldfinger has a genius plan to break into Fort Knox, but leave the gold behind in a scheme to bump the market value of gold tenfold. It's not going to take an army to stop Goldfinger, but Bond's rather special talents. Many of you saw this coming. It is a generational thing for one to pick Goldfinger as a most favorite. Goldfinger is a villain who is relatable but despicable. He's wealthy, but it's not like he's fronting his own space program. Goldfinger tries to use his money to get into social graces, but is unable to obtain invulnerability. He comes across as someone who really doesn't deserve what he has, let alone what he wants. It almost seems Bond is the antagonist to the anti-hero of Goldfinger, who only wanted to purchase respect. Harold Sakata as Oddjob will forever set the standard of what it means to be a villain sidekick. He will be imitated in future Bond films, but never equaled. Though From Russia with Love will do it first, Goldfinger continues an often used trope, having the fight with the sidekick in the finale, followed by a shortened epilogue with a final boss fight. Honor Blackman, remembered from the British series The Avengers as Pussy Galore, a damn good pilot, has a no-nonsense outlook when it comes to living on an island at the expense of murdering thousands. A lot of the success is credited to the bodywork of Gert Fruba as Goldfinger. His mannerisms were especially convincing, knowing his voice was mostly dubbed by Michael Collins. Goldfinger is about excess, the wild scheme that's not too wild. It's also the first film free from the Spectre plot thread. Goldfinger is the villain who doesn't have to answer to a big baddie. He's not interested in extortion or blackmail. His motivations are clear and unambiguous. He loves gold. Only gold. That is how I would rank my recommendations of the Connery era Bond films. Let me know your list. Maybe you'll want me to tackle other subjects or eras from the Bond franchise. This is Mr. G of Synergy saying, "Don't bruise your martini" is the trademark of an amateur. Check out other videos on my main channel. Thanks for watching.